In this video, we'll learn how to develop a Spring REST controller. Alrighty, let's go ahead and set up a Spring REST Hello World example. So we'll have this REST client, we'll also have this REST service, and what we'll do is we'll basically make a request for /test/hello. This REST service will respond with hello world. So on the far right side, we'll actually write the code here for the REST service. On the left-hand side, as far as the REST client, we can make use of either the web browser or we can make use of Postman, and I'll show you how to use both of them. Alrighty, so here's the basic coding here for a Spring REST controller. So we have this @REST controller, @request mapping /test, and then public class demo REST controller. So this looks like a normal Spring MVC controller. However, now we're making use of this @REST controller. So this adds the REST support. So then in the actual code, we simply set up a mapping. So here we'll set up a get mapping for /hello. We write our method, public string, say hello, and then we simply return hello world. Basically, at this point, we've defined this RESTful endpoint or this path that we can access. We could access this REST endpoint by simply going to /test/hello. And now this will actually return to the client hello world, back to the actual calling program. Now, let's talk about clients here. So we can test this with the REST client using Postman. So in Postman, we simply drop in the URL here. We simply go to localhost 8080, the name of our app, Spring REST Demo, /test/hello. So that'll access that REST endpoint. And so at the bottom, we'll actually get the response, hello world. So that's an example here using Postman. Now we could also do a similar thing with the web browser. So in the web browser, you simply drop in the URL here, /test/hello, and it'll return the response here, hello world. So you're probably wondering, web browser or Postman? Well, for simple REST testing for GET request, the web browser and Postman, they're similar. However, for advanced REST testing, like using post or put, etc., then Postman has much better support. So if you need to post JSON data, set the content type, pass over request headers, do authentication, then it's much easier to do this using Postman. So Postman is really designed out of the box as a REST client testing tool. So Postman has a lot of rich support here. For the simple stuff, you can use the browser, but for really advanced development, you'll need to use Postman. Okay, here's the development process. In step 1, we're going to add the Maven Spring dependency for Spring Boot Starter Web, and then we'll create the Spring REST service using the REST controller annotation. Here's step 1 of adding the Maven dependency. In your pom.xml file, you'll add an entry here for the Spring Boot Starter Web. And instead of adding it manually, you can have this selected at the Spring Initializer website. On that website, when you're setting up your project, simply select the web dependency. And I'll show you how to do that in the next video. So this is just like the code we saw a little bit earlier for building out our Spring REST service. We simply write our @REST controller. Here we set the request mapping for /test, and then we simply write the endpoints of the mappings here. So @get mapping /hello, return hello world. So that's basically it here for actually building out the REST service. So let's go ahead and visit start.spring.io in our web browser. All right, so we're here at the Spring Initializer website. Here we'll select Maven, different languages here. I'll choose Java. And then also, as far as the Spring Boot version, I'll choose this one listed here on the screen. So choose the most recent version that they have here. Avoid the snapshot versions because they are alpha, beta. So just choose the latest released version. I guarantee you the version that you see on your computer will be much different than what's recorded because new versions of Spring Boot are released on a very frequent basis. So simply just choose the latest released version. Alrighty, so that's taken care of. We can move into our project metadata where we can set up our coordinates here. So I'll set up the group ID. And for dependencies here, this is where we go through and basically just choose the Spring Boot starters that we want or the actual dependencies that we want for our application. So here I'll just keep it simple. I'll just choose web. So be sure to click that option and make sure it's selected and it appears here as far as a selected dependency. And then from there, just go down to the bottom and download the zip file by clicking on Generate Project. I can swing over to my file system, and the next step is unzipping that file. So I'll just move into my downloads directory on my computer. I'll unzip it. I'll open up a new Finder window so I can copy things back and forth. Now what I'll do is I'll move into our Dev Spring Boot folder, and I'll create a new folder here. And I'll call it O4 Spring Boot Rest CRUD. And I'll go ahead and move into this folder, and then I'll go ahead and drag and drop that demo down into this folder O4 Spring Boot Rest CRUD. And then I'll simply rename this demo folder. And I'll call it O1 Spring Boot Rest CRUD. Now let's go ahead and open this in IntelliJ. Now I think we can start working on writing some code here for our REST controller. So I'll move back over to the project, and what I want to do is actually set up a new package here for our REST coding. So I'll just grab this one package and I'll create a new one. New package. .rest. And so this is where I'll place my REST controllers. So I'm just adding a new package here. So I'll go ahead and create a new class here for this REST controller. And the actual name I'll give for this, I'll call it Demo REST Controller. So there we go. So we have this new Demo REST Controller. Expand the window here. And so we'll set up that REST controller and then at request mapping. So again, we're saying, hey, this is some REST support, and then we set up the mapping for it. All right, so let me just write a quick comment here to myself. So I'm going to add code for the /hello endpoint. And basically, I'll simply just return hello world. So I'll just set up this get mapping and give the path here, hello. Create a method. It's going to return a string called say hello. And keeping it very simple, right? Just return hello world. So that's basically it as far as the coding here for this REST controller. So I have this endpoint /hello, and I simply return hello world. All right, so let's go ahead and test this out and let's see it work. All we have to do is simply go up to this URL bar and just type in /test/hello. And cross your fingers, and then booyah, there's hello world. So that's the response here from our REST controller or our REST service. I like it. I'm excited. Woo! All right, now let's take this URL here and let's just copy it because we want to put this in the Postman. So I'll just copy that whole path or that whole URL, and then I'll swing over to Postman. And then I'll just simply move up here to this section here for the GET request, and I'll just paste it in here. I'll hit the send button over here on the far right. And then at the bottom, I get the actual response. Hello world. Oh yeah, I like it. So again, we're using Postman to access this REST controller or this REST service, and we're getting a response. So we look at pretty, raw, and then over on the far right, you can get the actual status code of 200, means that it was a successful request.